The mockery. The transmission burned across every communication channel in human space simultaneously. It came without warning, without diplomacy, without the courtesy that even the most aggressive species typically offered. The Chrythian Empire had spoken, and they expected obedience. Humans of the outer colonies will evacuate Terminus Prime, New Sahara, and the frost settlements within 10 standard cycles. These worlds now belong to the Chrythian Empire. Resistance will be met with total extermination. This is not negotiable. This is not a threat. This is reality. In the capital chambers of Earth, where the United Human Council convened in emergency session, the message played on loop. Silence filled the room as politicians, military commanders, and diplomatic advisors absorbed the words. 10 standard cycles. Less than 3 weeks to evacuate 12 million people from their homes, their farms, their entire lives. Chancellor Wei stood at the head of the table, her face carved from stone. Options, she said simply. General Tomas Rodriguez spoke first. Military response is possible, but costly. The Chrythian fleet outnumbers ours 15 to 1 in that sector. We could fight, but we would lose thousands of ships and possibly the colonies anyway. Diplomatic channels? Wei asked. Ambassador Chandra shook his head. The Chrythians don't negotiate. They've absorbed 43 species into their empire over the past 8,000 years. Their pattern is consistent: demand, wait for refusal, annihilate, colonize. They've never reversed a territorial claim. So we surrender, someone muttered. We do not surrender, said a quiet voice from the far end of the table. Everyone turned. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in the shadows, having said nothing for the entire meeting. She was ancient by military standards, 68 years old with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was simple, decorated only with a single ribbon that most people in the room didn't recognize. Those who did had unconsciously leaned away from her when she entered. Chancellor Wei studied the old woman carefully. Captain Vasquez. You've been silent. I've been thinking, Elena replied. She stood slowly, her movements careful but steady. The Chrythians have made a mistake. They've challenged us publicly, in front of the entire galactic community. They've demanded we appear before the Neutral Assembly to formally surrender our colonies. That's not a mistake, Rodriguez said. That's humiliation. They want the galaxy to watch us kneel. Elena smiled, and something in that smile made several people uncomfortable. Exactly. They want an audience. So let's give them one. What are you proposing? Wei asked. I'm proposing that I go. Alone. I will represent humanity before the Chrythian Warmaster and the assembled species of the galaxy. Elena's voice was calm, almost gentle. And I will give them a choice. The room erupted in protest. One frail old woman against the most feared military empire in known space? It was suicide. It was surrender with extra steps. It was madness. Wei raised her hand for silence. She looked at Elena for a long moment, seeing something in the old captain's eyes that others missed. What choice will you offer them? Peace, Elena said. Or the alternative? And what is the alternative? Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached up and slowly unbuttoned the top of her uniform collar, revealing the edge of a scar that disappeared beneath her shirt. The alternative is that humanity stops pretending we're something we're not. Wei understood. She had seen Elena's classified file. She knew what the old woman had lived through, what she had done, what humanity had been before they reached for the stars. You have authorization, Wei said quietly. God help us all. 3 days later, Elena stood alone in the docking bay of the Neutral Assembly Station, a massive structure that orbited the planet Sanctum in neutral space. The station had been built specifically for moments like this, when species came together to witness treaties, surrenders, and the occasional execution of those who defied galactic powers. The bay was crowded with representatives from hundreds of species. Some came out of curiosity, others out of pity for the humans who would soon be humbled. All of them watched as the old human woman walked slowly across the polished floor, her soft footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. She wore no armor. She carried no weapons. She looked like someone's grandmother who had accidentally wandered into a war council. The Chrythian delegation waited at the far end of the chamber. They were impossible to miss. Chrythians stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in interlocking plates of bio-armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their heads were elongated, with 4 eyes arranged in a pattern that gave them nearly complete spherical vision. Their hands ended in retractable claws that could pierce starship hulls. At the center of the delegation stood Warmaster Zefker, the conqueror of the Helion sector, the destroyer of the VYX resistance, the being who had personally overseen the subjugation of 17 species. He was massive even by Chrythian standards, his armor decorated with the symbols of conquered worlds. As Elena approached, Zefker began to laugh. It was a deep, resonating sound that echoed through the chamber. His warriors joined in, and soon the entire Crithian delegation was laughing at the small, old human who walked toward them without fear. This, Zefkar's voice boomed through the translation systems. This is what humanity sends to face the Crithian Empire? An elder female who can barely walk straight? The assembled species murmured. Some laughed nervously. Others simply felt embarrassment for humanity. The Terran species had seemed promising when they first joined galactic civilization 22 years ago, but they had never shown any real strength. They traded, they talked, they avoided conflict. And now they sent a single old woman to surrender their colonies. Elena reached the designated position and stopped. She did not bow. She did not lower her eyes. She simply stood and waited for the laughter to fade. When silence finally returned, she spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying through the chamber without need for amplification. War Master Zefkar. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Human Fleet. I come to speak on behalf of all humanity regarding your territorial demands. Zefkar leaned forward, his four eyes focusing on her with predatory interest. You come to surrender. Say the words, human. Tell the galaxy that your species yields to Crithian superiority. I come to give you a choice, Elena replied calmly. More laughter from the Crithians. Zefkar raised a clawed hand for silence. A choice? What choice does prey offer to the predator? The choice between peace and war, Elena said. Between coexistence and annihilation. Between accepting our offer of friendship or discovering what humanity truly is. Zefkar's expression shifted to amusement. We know what humanity is. You are a young species from a minor world. You have 83 military vessels in total. We have 15,000 in this sector alone. You have 3 colonies under dispute. We have conquered 400 worlds. You have been in space for barely 2 decades. We have ruled the stars for 8 millennia. These are the facts. These are the numbers. What choice do you imagine you have to offer? Elena nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Then she reached up and began to unfasten her uniform jacket. The Crithian warriors tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but Zefkar waved them back with curiosity. She removed the jacket carefully, folding it and setting it aside. Then she pulled off the shirt beneath, standing in only a simple undershirt that revealed her arms and the top of her chest. The chamber went silent. Elena's body was a canvas of violence. Scars covered every visible inch of her skin. Long, ragged lines where blades had cut deep. Circular marks where projectiles had torn through flesh. Burns that had never fully healed, the skin still twisted and discolored after decades. And across her left shoulder, a mark that made several alien observers gasp, the distinctive pattern of a plasma weapon discharge at close range, the kind of injury that should have been fatal. I received most of these before I turned 20 years old, Elena said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced even the whispers. I was a soldier in humanity's last war. The war we fought against ourselves. The war that nearly ended our entire species. She turned slowly, letting them see her back. More scars. More evidence of survival against impossible odds. I have killed more sentient beings than I can count. I have watched my friends die in my arms. I have made decisions that still wake me in the night, 48 years later. I have seen what humans do to each other when we stop holding back. Elena pulled her shirt back on, covering the scars. And I am not special. I am not the strongest human. I am not the most dangerous human. I am not even close. She looked directly at Zefkar. I am simply the one who was willing to come here and give you this warning. Zefkar's amusement had faded. He studied her with new interest, his predatory instincts recognizing something in the old woman that he had initially missed. What warning? Elena reached into her pocket and withdrew a small device. Several Crithian warriors raised weapons immediately, but she moved slowly, showing it to be nothing more than a simple communicator. War Master Zefkar, you asked what choice I have to offer. Let me show you. She pressed a single button on the device and spoke 2 words, protocol silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sensor displays throughout the chamber began to flash warning signals. The Crithian tactical officers checked their equipment, confusion spreading through their ranks. What is this? Zefkar demanded. Elena smiled, and in that smile was something that made even the War Master pause. You showed me your numbers. 15,000 ships in this sector. Impressive. Now let me show you mine. On the massive display screens that ringed the chamber, the space around Sanctum appeared. The visual feed showed the normal traffic of diplomatic vessels, cargo haulers, and the 3 small human escort ships that had brought Elena to the station. Then the image changed. Where there had been 3 human vessels, there were now 300. They appeared instantaneously, materializing from what looked like empty space. Sleek, angular ships that looked nothing like the civilian vessels humanity typically flew. These were weapons. Pure and simple. Built for one purpose only. The assembled species erupted in shocked exclamations. The Crythian warriors moved into defensive formations, their weapons raised. Zefker stared at the display, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "We call it quantum fold technology," Elena explained calmly. "The ships don't travel through normal space. They exist in a folded dimension adjacent to our reality. Undetectable until we choose to reveal them. We've been testing it for 19 years. You've never known they were there." She walked closer to Zefker, her old legs carrying her with deliberate purpose. 300 ships. Not 15,000. You're right about the numbers. But let me ask you something, War Master. How many ships did it take to conquer the Hellion sector? Zefker's mandibles clicked with irritation. 4,000. But they were primitive. They had no real defenses. And how many ships did you lose? 217. Elena nodded. 217 ships lost against a primitive species. Now imagine fighting a species that doesn't meet you in fleet battles. A species that strikes from folded space, from dimensions you can't detect, from distances you can't calculate. A species that doesn't play by your rules. She pointed to the display. Each of those ships carries weapons you've never encountered. Weapons we built during our last war. Weapons we've spent 2 decades improving with technology we learned from the galaxy. Zefker found his voice, though it was less confident than before. 300 ships cannot defeat 15,000. Even with tricks and hidden technology, the mathematics are against you. You're absolutely right, Elena agreed. 300 ships cannot defeat 15,000. That's why we wouldn't try. She pressed another button on her communicator. Show them. One of the human ships on the display moved away from the formation. It accelerated toward the system's outer asteroid belt, reaching one of the larger rocks in seconds. Then it fired. The projectile was invisible to most sensors. It traveled too fast, moved too precisely. But when it struck the asteroid, the result was unmistakable. The asteroid, roughly 5 kilometers across, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field. One moment it was there. The next moment, there was only empty space and a faint energy signature that made the Crythian sensors scream warnings about exotic radiation. "We call them erasure weapons," Elena said into the stunned silence. "They don't destroy matter. They remove it from existence. That asteroid didn't explode. It's simply gone. Removed from this reality entirely." She looked at Zefker with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much. Each of those ships carries enough erasure weapons to remove every Crythian vessel in this sector from existence. We wouldn't need to fight your 15,000 ships. We would simply erase them. Along with any reinforcements you sent. And any worlds you launched them from. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the Crythian warriors had lowered their weapons, staring at the display with expressions of pure shock. "But that's not our strongest weapon," Elena continued, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. "That's just the one we're willing to show you. The weapons we keep hidden, the things we built when humanity faced extinction and decided that if we died, we would take the entire universe with us." She shook her head. "Those weapons, I cannot even describe. Not because they're secret, but because words don't exist for what they do." She stepped back, her old body suddenly looking very tired. "So here is your choice, War Master Zefker. Here is the decision I came to offer." Elena's voice grew hard as steel. "You can accept that humanity wants peace. You can withdraw your territorial demands. You can acknowledge that the galaxy is big enough for all of us to coexist. You can accept our hand in friendship, even though we both know you don't believe in friendship." She paused, letting the weight of her next words build. "Or you can refuse. You can insist on war. You can try to take our colonies by force. And you will discover that the old woman standing before you, with her scars and her gray hair and her slow walk, is not humanity's weapon." Elena's smile was terrible to behold. "I'm just the warning." The sensor alarms suddenly increased in pitch and intensity. The Crythian tactical officers were frantically checking their displays, their clicking mandibles creating a chorus of panic. War Master Zefker looked at his instruments, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, his 4 eyes showed something no one had ever seen before. Fear. "What?" he whispered. "What are those readings?" Elena glanced at her communicator. "Those? Those are the rest of the fleet. The real fleet. The one we don't keep in folded space because it's too dangerous to hide." She looked up at him. 300 ships was the warning demonstration, War Master. "Would you like to see what we brought for the actual war?" The warning. War Master Zefker's claws scraped against the polished floor of the assembly chamber. His 4 eyes remained fixed on the sensor displays that now painted a picture no Krithian commander had ever witnessed. The numbers climbing on the screens defied everything he understood about warfare, about power, about the natural order of the galaxy. Impossible, he breathed, his translator struggling to convey the tremor in his voice. Elena Vasquez stood perfectly still, watching the War Master's reaction with the patience of someone who had waited decades for this moment. Around the chamber, representatives from hundreds of species pressed closer to their own displays, trying to comprehend what their sensors were telling them. The space around Sanctum, which moments ago had revealed 300 hidden human vessels, now showed something that made those numbers seem insignificant. Thousands of contacts were appearing on long-range sensors. Not materializing from folded space this time, but approaching from the outer system at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of their size. 7,342 vessels, reported a Krithian tactical officer, his voice hollow with disbelief. Ranging from corvette class to War Master, some of those signatures are larger than anything in our fleet. The largest reads at 15 kilometers long. Zefker turned to Elena, his bioarmor plates shifting with barely controlled aggression. You said humanity had 83 military vessels. This was confirmed by our intelligence. By every species' intelligence. How can you hide a fleet of this size? We didn't hide it, Elena replied simply. We built it. Over the past 22 years, while we smiled and traded and attended your diplomatic functions, we built it. Every human colony has construction facilities. Every civilian station has military fabrication hidden beneath its commercial levels. Every mining operation in every asteroid belt has been pulling resources not just for trade, but for this. She gestured to the display. We learned something from our history, War Master. We learned that hoping for peace is not the same as preparing for peace. So we prepared for both. The approaching fleet began to resolve into individual ships on the tactical displays. They were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where most species built their warships as massive, heavily armored vessels designed to exchange fire in traditional fleet engagements, these human ships were different. They were angular, almost skeletal in structure, built around massive central cores that pulsed with energy signatures no one could identify. Those central structures, Zefker said slowly, his tactical mind reasserting itself despite his shock. What are they? We call them Reaper cores, Elena said. They're the reason we don't need to match your numbers, War Master. They're the reason we don't build fleets the way you do. She walked to the central holographic display, moving with that careful, measured pace that reminded everyone in the chamber of her age. But her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of someone who had survived things that would have broken lesser beings. During Earth's final war, we learned something terrible about ourselves. We learned that humans are very, very good at killing. Not just killing individuals, but killing on scales that erase entire populations. We developed weapons that could burn continents, poison oceans, turn our own atmosphere into a toxic soup that would take centuries to clear. She paused, her fingers touching the holographic controls. The display shifted, showing archival footage from Earth's past. Cities in ruins. Landscapes scorched black. Humans in protective suits moving through dead zones where nothing could survive. This was Detroit. Population 8 million. It took 47 minutes to reduce it to this. The image showed a crater where a city had been. This was the Amazon basin. We turned 2 million square kilometers of rainforest into a desert in 6 days. This was the Pacific Fleet engagement. 14,000 ships destroyed each other in 8 hours. The radiation from that battle made the ocean uninhabitable for 200 kilometers in every direction. The assembled species watched in horrified silence. Even the Krithians, who had conquered dozens of worlds, had never witnessed destruction on this scale delivered with such brutal efficiency. We did this to ourselves, Elena continued softly. To our own planet. To our own people. Because we were fighting for survival, and humans who fight for survival don't care about collateral damage. We don't care about proportional response. We care only about winning, no matter the cost. She closed the historical files and brought up technical schematics of the Reaper cores. When the war ended, when we finally looked at what we had become, we made a decision. We decided that if we ever went to war again, it would not be a war of attrition. It would not be a war of matched fleets and calculated losses. It would be a war of such overwhelming, terrifying force that our enemies would have only 2 choices, immediate surrender or immediate annihilation. Elena's finger traced the schematic. The Reaper core is a contained quantum singularity. A tiny black hole, held in suspension by gravitational field generators. When activated, it releases a pulse of exotic energy that propagates through normal space at faster-than-light speeds. She looked up at Zefker. It doesn't destroy ships. It doesn't need to. It simply reaches into every piece of matter within its range and tears apart the molecular bonds holding that matter together. The War Master's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. What is the range? The smallest cores, mounted on our corvettes, have a range of approximately 1 million kilometers. The largest cores, on our dreadnoughts, can reach 30 million kilometers. Elena's voice remained calm, almost conversational. And the pulse passes through shields, through armor, through any physical barrier. Because it doesn't interact with matter in the traditional sense. It interacts with the quantum fields that allow matter to exist. She gestured to the approaching fleet. 7,000 ships. Each carrying at least one Reaper core. Do you understand what this means, War Master? Zefker did understand. His tactical training, honed over centuries of warfare, did the mathematics instantly. With ranges like that, overlapping fields of effect, the ability to ignore all conventional defenses, his 15,000 ships in the sector would not stand a chance. They would be reduced to their component atoms before they could even close to weapons range. You're lying, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. No species would build weapons like this. The energy requirements alone would be impossible. The risk of containment failure would destroy your own ships. You're right about the risk, Elena agreed. We lost 43 ships during the testing phase. Containment failures that turned those vessels and everything within 5 million kilometers into expanding clouds of disassociated particles. We mounted monuments to those crews on Luna. 4,721 humans who died so that the rest of us could have the power to defend ourselves. She pulled up casualty reports, letting the names scroll across the display. Real names. Real people. Real sacrifices. We paid the price in blood, War Master. Because humans always pay the price when it matters. A new voice entered the conversation, high-pitched and trembling. Ambassador Chixtal of the Voran Collective, a species known for their pacifism and diplomatic skill, stepped forward. His 6 legs clicked nervously against the floor. Captain Vasquez, he said, his translator rendering his distress clearly, if what you say is true, then humanity possesses weapons that could sterilize entire sectors of the galaxy. Weapons that violate every convention of warfare, every principle of proportional response. How can you stand here and claim to want peace when you have built instruments of genocide? Elena turned to face the Voran ambassador. Her expression softened slightly, showing genuine regret. Ambassador Chixtal, you're absolutely right. These weapons are monstrous. They are tools of genocide. They are everything that civilized beings should reject. She walked toward him slowly. But let me ask you something. Your people have been part of galactic civilization for 12,000 years. In that time, how many species has the Voran Collective conquered? None, Chixtal said proudly. We have never engaged in aggressive warfare. And how many species have conquered you? The ambassador's body language shifted to one of deep sadness. 3 times. The Crithians most recently, 500 years ago. Before that, the Moradin Empire. Before that, the First Hegemony. And each time, what happened to your worlds? We were occupied. Our resources were taken. Our people were enslaved or conscripted. Millions died. Chixtal's voice was barely a whisper. We eventually regained our independence through diplomatic means, through waiting for our conquerors to overextend themselves, through patience and negotiation. Elena nodded gently. Through suffering. Through submission. Through hoping that eventually your oppressors would choose to be merciful. She gestured to the display showing the human fleet. Humanity cannot live like that, Ambassador. We tried. For 22 years, we tried to be the species that extended friendship, that negotiated, that relied on diplomacy and good faith. And what happened? She turned back to Zefker. The Crithians tested us. Again and again. They pushed our boundaries, insulted our diplomats, threatened our colonies. They watched to see if we would fight back. And when we didn't, they concluded we were weak. They concluded we were prey. Elena's voice grew harder. So we stopped trying to convince them through words. We built these weapons so that we would never have to convince anyone again. So that no species would look at humanity and see weakness. So that when we extend our hand in friendship, others will understand that we are choosing peace, not accepting subjugation. War Master Zefker had been listening to this exchange with growing unease. He recognized the logic behind humanity's actions because it was the same logic that had driven Crithian expansion for millennia. The strong ruled. The weak served. There was no middle ground. Except humanity had found a middle ground. They had made themselves so dangerous that fighting them was suicide, but they had not used that power to conquer. They had simply waited. Hidden their strength and waited for someone to force their hand. You are bluffing, he said, though even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. You would not use these weapons. To do so would make you the monsters you claim to have left behind. Elena's expression became something cold and ancient. War Master, let me tell you about the Battle of Denver. It happened in the final year of Earth's last war. The Western Coalition held the city with 2 million soldiers and 300,000 civilians who couldn't be evacuated. The Eastern Alliance surrounded them with 5 million troops and gave them one chance to surrender. She pulled up more historical footage. The coalition refused. They knew that surrender meant execution for the soldiers and enslavement for the civilians. So they fought. For 42 days, they fought. And when it became clear they would lose, when the Alliance breached the final defenses and entered the city, the coalition commander activated a weapon they had hidden beneath the city's foundations. The footage showed a flash of light that whited out all the cameras. When the image cleared, there was nothing. No city. No soldiers. No civilians. Just a perfectly smooth crater that still glowed with residual heat. 7,300,000 people died in that instant, Elena said quietly. Both sides. Wiped out because the coalition commander decided that if his people could not live free, then no one would have them. She looked at Zefker with eyes that had witnessed horrors beyond imagination. That commander was my father. And before he activated the weapon, he recorded a message. Would you like to know what he said? The War Master said nothing. He couldn't. His entire understanding of warfare, of conquest, of the natural order was crumbling around him. He said, let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks humans will accept slavery. Let this crater stand as a monument to the price we will pay for freedom. We do not want war. We do not want death. But if forced to choose between submission and annihilation, we will choose annihilation every single time. And we will take you with us. Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the chamber, every word carried clearly. I inherited that message, War Master. Every human who lived through that war inherited it. We carry it in our bones, in our blood, in the scars that cover our bodies. We know what we are capable of. We know what we will do if pushed too far. She straightened her shoulders, and despite her age, despite her small stature compared to the towering Crithians, she suddenly seemed larger than any of them. So here is my warning, and I will only say it once. Humanity wants peace. We genuinely, desperately want to coexist with you, with the Vorin, with every species in this galaxy. We want to trade, to learn, to share cultures and ideas. We want to be friends. She paused, letting the weight of her next words build. But if you force us to choose between peace and survival, we will choose survival. And we will prosecute that survival with every weapon we have built, every tactic we have learned, every ounce of brutality that made us the apex predators on a death world. We will not fight fair. We will not fight honorably. We will simply fight until either you are gone or we are. Elena walked back to the center of the chamber, standing alone between the Crithian delegation and the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The 7,000 ships you see approaching are not an invasion force. They are a deterrent. They exist so that species like the Crithians will understand that conquering humanity is not difficult, it's impossible. They exist so that we never have to use them. She pulled out her communicator again. But make no mistake. If you refuse to withdraw your territorial demands, if you insist on war, I will give the order. And those ships will activate their Reaper cores. And your fleet will cease to exist. And then more ships will come, and your colonies in this sector will cease to exist. And then more ships will come, and we will keep coming until either you surrender or there are no more Crithians left to surrender to. Her finger hovered over the communicator. This is your choice, War Master Zefker. This is the decision I came to offer. Peace or extinction. Coexistence or annihilation. Choose wisely, because I am an old woman with limited patience, and I have seen enough death to last 1,000 lifetimes. I do not want to see more. But I will if I must. The chamber held its breath. 7,000 human warships continued their approach, their Reaper cores pulsing with barely contained power. The Crithian fleet, 15,000 strong, remained on high alert but had not moved to engage. Everyone waited for the War Master's response. Zefker looked at the old human woman standing before him. He saw her scars, her age, her weariness. But he also saw something else. He saw the truth of what she represented. Not weakness. Not surrender. But the carefully controlled violence of a species that had nearly destroyed itself and had learned from that experience how to destroy others. He thought of the 43 species the Crithians had conquered. Most had surrendered after seeing the might of the Crithian fleet. A few had fought and lost, their resistance crushed under overwhelming force. But none of them had stood here and offered to erase his entire fleet from existence with the calm certainty of someone discussing the weather. None of them had been human. Why did you wait? He asked finally. If you have had this power for years, why wait until now to reveal it? Elena's expression softened slightly. Because we hoped we wouldn't have to. Because every day that we don't use these weapons is a day when humanity is still something other than monsters. Because the moment we activate those Reaper cores, we cross a line that we can never uncross. We become the species that casually erases other species from existence. We become the thing we fought a war to stop being. She lowered her communicator slightly. We gave you 22 years, War Master. 22 years to learn that humans could be friends. 22 years to understand that strength and aggression are not the same thing. 22 years to realize that the most dangerous species are not the ones who fight constantly, but the ones who choose not to fight until they have no other choice. Zefker was silent for a long moment. His 4 eyes studied Elena, seeing her in a new light. Not as prey. Not as an inferior species. But as something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. If I withdraw our territorial claims, he said slowly, if the Crythian Empire acknowledges human sovereignty over your colonies, what guarantee do we have that you will not use these weapons against us anyway? What stops you from erasing us now that you have shown your strength? Elena smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. The same thing that has stopped us for 22 years, War Master. The same thing that stopped us from using these weapons the moment you threatened our colonies. The same thing that will stop us tomorrow and every day after. She put away her communicator. We don't want to be monsters. We have been monsters. We know exactly what it feels like, and we never want to feel that way again. We built these weapons so we would never have to use them. We hide our strength so we don't have to prove it. We extend our hand in friendship because we genuinely hope that friendship is possible. She walked toward Zefker until she stood directly before him, this tiny old woman facing the massive conqueror of worlds. But never, ever mistake our hope for naivety. Never mistake our restraint for weakness. Never mistake our choice for peace as an inability to wage war. Because the day you make that mistake, the day any species makes that mistake, is the day they discover what humanity truly is. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. I am not humanity's weapon, War Master. I am just the warning. And I pray to whatever gods might listen that you heed it. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then War Master Zefker, the conqueror of 17 worlds, the being who had never retreated from a fight in his 300-year military career, did something no one had ever seen him do. He bowed. It was a small bow, barely an inclination of his head. But from a Crythian War Master, it was an acknowledgement of defeat more profound than any formal surrender. The Crythian Empire withdraws all territorial claims against human colonies, he said, his voice steady but lacking its earlier arrogance. We acknowledge human sovereignty over Terminus Prime, New Sahara, and the Frost settlements. We will retreat our forces from human space within 3 standard cycles. He paused, then added something that shocked every being in the chamber. And the Crythian Empire formally requests a peace treaty with humanity. Terms to be negotiated in good faith, with mutual respect for territorial integrity and sovereign rights. Elena nodded slowly. Accepted. The United Human Council will send diplomatic representatives to begin treaty negotiations within the month. And War Master Zefker, thank you. For choosing wisely. The Crythian delegation filed out of the chamber, their warriors no longer laughing at the old human woman. The assembled species began to disperse as well, already composing urgent messages to their home governments. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was not what they appeared to be. Elena stood alone in the center of the chamber, suddenly looking very tired. Chancellor Wei's voice came through her communicator. Captain Vasquez, you did it. The fleet is standing down. All units returning to secure positions. My God, Elena, you actually did it. I told them the truth, Elena replied quietly. Nothing more. Did you mean it? Wei asked. Would you have given the order if he refused? Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice heavy with a weariness that came from decades of carrying impossible burdens. I don't know, Chancellor. I honestly don't know. I hope I never have to find out. She walked slowly toward the exit, her old legs carrying her away from the chamber where she had just rewritten the galaxy's understanding of humanity. Behind her, the display still showed the 7,000 human warships, their Reaper cores pulsing with barely contained power. Weapons of genocide. Tools of annihilation. The price humanity had paid to ensure they would never be conquered. And the hope, the desperate hope, that they would never have to use them. As Elena reached the docking bay where her ship waited, she paused and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 12 million humans lived their lives on the colonies that had almost been taken from them. They would never know how close they had come to extinction, how close the entire galaxy had come to witnessing what humanity could do when pushed too far. She touched the scars hidden beneath her uniform, remembering Earth's last war. Remembering her father's final message. Remembering the price of freedom. We choose what we become, she whispered to the stars. Every single day, we choose. And with that, she boarded her ship and began the long journey home, carrying the weight of humanity's darkest secrets and brightest hopes. The galaxy had been warned. Now it was up to them to decide what to do with that warning.